Hello and welcome to the Ending Body Burnout Show. We are your hosts, Chris and Philly, co-founders of a multi-award-winning functional medicine practice, serving busy people with energy, mood, and gut issues.
While busyness, addictive doing, people-pleasing, and perfectionism might be the norm, it's not normal, and it's a major contributor to health issues.
Our goal with this show is to give you a holistic root cause approach to healing your body so that you don't have to continue doctor or diet hopping or popping a gazillion supplements hoping something might stick.
So get ready to heal your body, get your spark back, deeply connect with yourself, and step into the life of your dreams.
Let's dive in.
Hi friend, welcome to the potty. So excited to be sharing this conversation with you. Before we dive into the episode, just another announcement. If you're a regular listener, you know I've been spouting on about my new book, Ending Body Burnout, for the past month. It's so exciting. It's like giving birth to a baby and it is so close to being released. So if you've had on your to-do list to purchase or pre-order a copy of the book, you have about a week left to do that, to then secure your free bonuses. So when you pre-order the book, before it's physically released, you'll receive almost $300 worth of free bonuses, including our Body Burnout and Perfectionism short course, our Gut Movement Masterclass, and our Communicating with Symptoms intimate workshop, which will be a live workshop that Chris and I will run with all the people who have pre-ordered the book. Dates for that to be announced. So, yep, have a look at the show notes, click the link and pre-order your book. And I'm so excited for everyone to be reading it so soon. And I'm just so incredibly grateful for the beautiful support that I have received with this book. We have had a lot of pre-orders coming through. So I know I'm going to be a busy bee, wrapping up and posting all those books really soon. Okay, so about today's episode, we have the wonderful Sammi Jaeger on our podcast today. Sammi is a powerhouse woman. She wears so many hats and she is super passionate about living a fueled up life. So I know you're going to really love this conversation. I came away from it feeling very motivated to fill up some tanks that have been a little bit low personally for me. And we'll talk about those tanks soon on the podcast. I've known Sammi for a couple of years now. We actually connected, probably about 2 years almost. And Chris and I went on her Date Forever podcast. I'll put the link to the show notes if you want to listen to that potty episode where Chris and I shared all the juicy details about how we make our relationship work, both in business, in family, and also past experiences where our relationship was on the rocks. And today we're lucky enough to have the tables turned and we interview Sammi on our podcast. So Sammi is an entrepreneur, co-founder, integrator, coach, speaker, author in the making, and co-host of the Date Forever podcast. After Sammi's life hit a crossroad, she hit the wall, picked herself up again, and began leaning into creating and living her own fueled up life, this time by design. Sammi is deeply passionate about how our relationships impact the quality of our lives, and she is an advocate for the UN global goals and knows that we all have a role to play in creating a better world. So without any further interruptions, let's jump right in and enjoy this conversation we had with Sammi.
All right, so let's dive in. Sammi, thanks so much for coming to join us. We are excited to have you on our podcast. I think maybe diving into a personal story first. You said in your bio you hit a crossroad, a brick wall. What happened there? When did you experience body burnout, and what was happening in your life at the time, business, personal, all that sort of stuff.
All the things. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. The two of you have been on our show, Date Forever. And I love chatting with you and hearing a bit about your story. So I'm very grateful to have the shoe on the other foot and come and join you on your show. So thank you. But yeah, I did. I hit a crossroad and I hit it pretty hard. It was in the beginning of 2019. I resigned from my first really big job. I was general manager at a training and education company, and I had grown through a massive trajectory of personal and professional growth over 3 years. I reckon I crammed about a decade's worth of growth into those 3 years.
Wow.
Or 3 and a bit years. And although I hit the wall in January, I really didn't deal with it until about September. And I sort of fumbled my way through that year. And then my beautiful husband, Nathan, and I had spent some time in Europe, gallivanting around. And I was really meant to do some soul searching. And we got to the end of the trip and Nath had to go back to work. And of course, I did not. But I wasn't ready to go and face my life. I was still not ready to restart, like, quote unquote normal life again. So Nath left Madrid and went back to Australia, and I went from there to Lombok, Indonesia, and basically cried for 2 weeks. I sat in my own discomfort of the life that I had created and how exhausted I was, even after being on holidays or traveling for 2 or 3 months, and just really had to go inwards to be like, what decisions did I make that has landed me here, and what am I going to do about it?
That's awesome. Other than
It wasn't awesome. It wasn't awesome at all.
like,
But
Awesome that you ended up in Indonesia having a cry, the soul
Yeah.
search.
like what
yeah.
what sort of physical symptoms other than crying, feeling exhausted, did you experience? Did you
I
have
was
any
pretty
other?
overwhelmed, I think, is like I was having difficulties making decisions because I think it was one part that I was I had all the options available to me. Like, when you end a big chapter, it's like, okay, now you really have to decide what you want to do next. And I think that was a little bit overwhelming. It was like, if you ever go to a restaurant and they give you a menu that's like 50 pages long, sometimes that could be a lot harder than being like, oh, here's the menu of 8 things and just choose one of those 8 and pick the one that really resonates. Like I had the menu of 50 things and I was really overwhelmed by that. But yeah, I was tired, I was exhausted. I was probably the heaviest I had been in a really long time. I wasn't sleeping that well. Wasn't having the best sex that like my husband and I could have. Like all of the I guess normal things that you experience, like headaches, and my vision wasn't that great. Like I was wearing my glasses more than I had historically. Like just the top to toe of symptoms that you would expect of someone who had been burning the candle at both ends for 4 years.
So then in Indonesia, did a bit of soul searching.
Thailand.
Thailand, sorry.
No,
Indonesia.
Was it
in Lombok.
Indonesia?
Thank
Oh
you.
yeah,
I thought it
Lombok.
was.
Where's Lombok?
Oh, it's like a small little island, a few hours boat ride from Bali.
Ah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
heard
yeah,
that
yeah.
one.
I was thinking Bangkok.
Close.
Yeah.
In the scheme of the world, Southeast Asia, it was close to that.
So what did you discover about yourself? If you think about the deeper root cause as to why you got into a state of body burnout, burning the candle at both ends for 4 years, what was the deeper root behind all of that?
Yeah, I had neglected a lot of the other areas of my life. I had gone all in on my career and my personal and professional development at the cost of almost everything else. Like, and in a lot of ways, although the pursuit of growth had been about building a better relationship with myself, it had actually cost me that. Like, one of the things that I did between crying sessions in Lombok was that I went out on the water and I hired a wakeboard and went and wakeboard for a couple of hours. And after that, I just felt so incredible having like used my body in that way, being on the water in the sun, doing something that is from my childhood and something that I really love to do. And I came back and I was just sitting and reflecting about how amazing that I felt. And when was the last time I did that? And it was no surprise more than 4 years ago.
Mm.
And that I really just sat with that and I was like, okay, well, what else in my life do I really love doing that I'm not doing, that I haven't been prioritizing? And I think I just found myself in this like headspace of everything that I was doing needed to be some sort of productive. There needed to be an outcome. There needed to be a result. And that had meant that things that I really loved doing, like baking, just turned into me buying the cake, not baking the cake. Which is not why I wasn't looking for the outcome. I was looking for following the process and the creative outlet and all of those kind of things. But yeah, that realization that there's a lot of things in my life that I really love doing that I haven't done for a long time. And I've created this life and lifestyle where they aren't embedded as things that I do often. And I really couldn't remember the last time I'd taken myself out for a coffee, not like a grab, a takeaway and run and between things, but like to really mindfully sit, either with a book or with a journal or with nothing, no stimulus at a coffee shop or a cafe and just be there like with myself. And that was really, really confronting. And that's a big part of how my husband and I have ended up with the Date Forever podcast. And we chat with couples and experts like the two of you who have found tips and tricks to keep their relationship with themselves and their chosen person fueled up. So I made a commitment to start dating myself again.
I love that. That's
That's
so
really
cool.
cool.
Did you bounce back pretty quickly after that realization and then prioritizing yourself and things that you
Gosh, I would
loved?
love to say yes. I would love to say like it was so easy, but I think one of the things, and I mean, you two are the experts in this, but I think one of the like social narratives like about burnout is like people say, oh, you just need to get some more sleep. You really just need to get some more rest. And like, that's really like the equivalent of parking a car that has no fuel in the garage for a week and then expecting it to drive perfectly when you pull it out. Like, that's not actually
like
what you
that.
need. You really need to figure out how to put more fuel back in the tank, and sitting alone resting is not always that. But yeah, I had a couple more confronting kind of like eye-opening experiences after that. So I came back to Australia. My deadline was not coming back to work, but it was to go to Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within event. And I'd bought those tickets almost 12 months prior. And it was probably the first like fully immersive personal development event that my husband and Nathan and I had committed to go to together. So that was my deadline. So that was pretty full on to go in and know that I'd already had this realization, but then to dig around in there a bit more about some of the limiting beliefs and things that I really needed to move through. But I was at an event run by General Assembly, which is just like a small education company, and they run like these networking events. And the event was like about refining your pitch and like, how do you introduce yourself when you're in a networking event? Who are you? What do you do? Who do you help? And this woman that I got paired with was a workplace psychologist who specialized in PTSD. And she was running through her pitch about what she does and who she helps. And I was like, holy crap, you're talking about me. That's what I've created for myself. I have this workplace experience that's now almost a year ago that I really haven't addressed. Like, I addressed some of it in terms of like my lifestyle, but I haven't actually really owned my part of that. So it was layers of rebuilding what I needed to look at introspectively to heal. It wasn't just about rest and ta-da, I was better. Like I wish I could, like, I can't even really point to the line in the sand of like, that was when I came full circle. There really wasn't one. It was just so gradual, bit by bit, looking under the hood and healing one thing at a time.
Which I think is so important too, because a lot of people, when they first start trying to address their health issues, their burnout, it's like expecting a magic pill. If I do this, I'm going to feel better in a month. And actually, with the health forms that we get new clients to fill in, there's a question around how long do you think that this will take in order to get the results that you want? And once I've had someone say days, And it's like,
Yeah.
hang on, when you've had these symptoms and this condition for 10 years, it's not going to flip around really quickly for most people.
Yeah. I think the decision can change really quickly, right? Like the commitment, like I'm committed to this transformation. I think that can happen really quickly, but the actual undoing of what likely is years that took me to get to that place, I don't think I was unrealistic that it was going to be instant. Yeah, I think I had some awareness, but it was definitely over a year of actively working on it after I'd ignored it for almost a year.
Mm. I actually feel like a year is a pretty standard.
Yeah.
And when you're doing deep healing as well. So did you do anything around like lab testing, supplements, diet, or it was more working on
So
deeper
yeah,
unconscious stuff?
I had done that sort of stuff previously, but one of the big things, like I mentioned, like I was having headaches, but I was having migraines, not just headaches, but like migraines, and that had been something that had been reoccurring in my life for a long time. And I'm pretty grateful to say, like, I'm 4 or 5 years on now, and I can't remember the last migraine that I had. But that was probably the thing that I went the most science-based route. I was like, let me see the neurologist, let me get the CAT scans, let me get the things. And ironically, none of those things helped. No, like none of those things led me to an answer. It was actually a naturopath who helped me work through that part. But yeah, so there was parts where I definitely sought like Western medicine to figure out like what was going on. But I think, and maybe it's only because I can see it in hindsight. I probably didn't know this in the moment, but so much of it was about, well, why did I overwork the way that I was overworking? What was I trying to prove and to who? Like, what was I doing there? So I think a lot more of that was far more healing than taking the supplements or the pills or um, not to say that those things don't have merit, because like I said, one of the things that has helped me get migraine free was some recommendations that a naturopath made, and it literally changed my life from having quite regular migraines to almost none.
Mm. Mm. So what did you discover then? Like around why were you behaving this way? Like what were the deeper beliefs, the programming, the events in the past that led to that point?
Yeah, I definitely think that I was trying to prove something. Like I was trying to prove that I was worthy of that big job that I'd like somehow found myself into. Because that hadn't been my career path. That wasn't the direction I was looking to go. And I think not ended up there by accident. I definitely made conscious choices and decisions, but I was very much trying to prove that I was worthy of that role, that I could do that role, that I could overperform in that role, that I could make really big changes to teams and culture and the business overall that I was working with. Um, yeah, so I think the underlying part more than anything was like about worthiness.
Mm. Yep. Huge, 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 huge. Okay. So you have created a life that is a fueled up life.
Yeah.
Is what you've created. So, and not by default, but by design. So, can you talk to us a bit about this? Because is this what and how you help others do that? You mentioned that there's 8 different tanks that you use to fill up your life. I'd love to like break all
Yeah.
those down.
So one of the things that I did on return from Lombok was start to get a bit more curious about like, okay, I went all in this one area of my life. What are the other areas? What are the other things that regularly need fuel that I wasn't adding fuel to? So Nathan and I had already sort of had like a planning practice where every year we take 1 or 2 days, and what we now call is our annual game plan day. We make a plan, we make a game plan for the year to follow. But we went back through some of the notes and looked at what were the reoccurring themes of, what are the different areas of my life and our shared life that if they go unneglected, if they go overlooked, like they will run out, they will hit empty. So we've identified 8 of them, and we've spoken to so many couples and experts about these different areas of life, and they resonate for most people. So the first one is self. It's my relationship with myself sets the tone for every other relationship that I have. It's my romantic relationship, and just that love is the best thing that I do or that we do. And it isn't passive. We do it. It's a doing word. It's a doing thing. The next one is the third one is my relationships and network. So recognizing that if I want to go far, I want to go with others, and who are those others, and who are the deep connections that I want and need in my life for it to be truly fueled up. It's my humming household. It's that my home, how it feels is way more important than how it looks. Like, do I have good systems in place that make that household hum with ease, and it's not sucking the time and energy away from like what are truly like the bigger problems that I could be solving. So it's about career and business, and recognizing that opportunities don't just happen, and that I create them. And then wealth and lifestyle. So yes, I might be creating the money that I want to attract and bring in, but do I have the lifestyle that matches that? So be about being really conscious about what lifestyle am I trying to design. If I have a perfect week, if I have a perfect month, if I have a perfect quarter, what does that actually look like? How much time am I spending surfing? How much time am I spending with my social network and with my connections? How much time am I spending working on my business, not in my business? How much downtime am I having? How many holidays am I having? Like truly unplugged. And then the world. So what unique skills and gifts am I contributing to the world, and a solution that's bigger than myself? So for me, I'm really passionate about the United Nations global goals, and in particular, education, because I believe that education is one of the fastest ways that we can bring people and communities and countries up and above that poverty line. So what am I doing to keep that contribution tank, or the world tank, fueled up? And then the last one is the future, and recognizing that future Sammi is actually current Sammi. And I'm making decisions now that are impacting my future. And if I don't ever think about the future tank, it might look pretty bleak. So those are the 8.
Super intentional. I'm like here thinking that is so organized.
You probably wouldn't have come up with those categories if you hadn't hit the wall. Hey, do you think?
Yeah.
Or maybe you would have, but not as fast.
Yeah, and definitely not in the way that I needed to. Like I'm actually now so incredibly grateful for that experience. Like, those things, I think the quote is like, those things that don't work out for you really did work out for you. And that's so true for this experience. Like I'm so grateful that I ran as hard and as fast into that wall as I did. And I was 30. Like, how freaking lucky am I that I figured that stuff out at 30? There's people that I know and that I've met who are much further along in life and still wrestling with some of those things, and haven't had those real obstacle is the way breakthrough. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't have come up with those 8, or got so introspective about my life and what I needed, and creating a framework for it where it's easy for me to think about which tank needs fuel.
How like, I'm kind of thinking from a practical point of view, do you have these visually somewhere? Like, how do you, if you're feeling, or what are the signs, first of all, when you're just like, oh, is there anything that you're like, oh, a tank is going, like, coming down? And then how do you pinpoint what tank it is?
So Nathan and I do this monthly check-in together. It's a reoccurring like calendar invite, literally as practical as that in our shared Google Calendar. But we do this monthly. We check in and give it a rating. Sometimes we use out of 5, sometimes we use out of 10. But like, how full is this tank? And some of them, obviously, we share, like our humming household. And some of it is about checking mine and Nate's alignment. Like, do we agree that our house has been a hellhole and has been really hard to manage? Or do we both feel like it's swimming along really well and it's happening with ease? But for me, introspectively, like, it's always curious, like if I show up that, oh, look, my relationship with myself is not feeling that great. And I look back at the last month and go, yeah, it's probably because you haven't taken yourself on a date, you haven't been as intentional with exercise, or, you're traveling and you made probably not the best choices for diet and sleep, and all of the like well-being fundamentals, haven't meditated. And it's just that invitation monthly to take a look, which tank needs fuel and what are you going to do about it? And that's what I asked myself, which tank needs fuel and what are you going to do about it?
That's cool. The way you were talking about that too, I didn't hear any feelings of self-guilt, self-shame. It's like, far out, I've stuffed up again this month. Oh, it's just purely like, oh, we can fill the tank up anytime.
Yeah.
It's within my power, but also life also happens. So it's not going to be perfect all the time, and that's okay.
Yeah, I'm super visual. So I like to think about these fuel tanks like the same way. I love flying, but I'm definitely not a pilot, right? But when I imagine the cockpit of a plane, like there's little dashes and dials and gauges everywhere in that cockpit. And there's some of them that matter more than others. And there's some that can be off course longer than others. And there's not an expectation that they're all perfect from take off to touchdown. And that's kind of how I think about my life, is like recognizing that not everything can be important all at the same time. If everything's important, then nothing's important. And I think this just gives me agency to go, look, do you know what? I know that my relationship and network tank is feeling pretty low at the moment. But actually, I've got some really big career things happening. I've got some really big, things happening in mine and Nate's marriage or whatever it might be. I've got some really big things happening in our home. Like, I'm okay to let that relationship and network tank stay at half, for this month, maybe even next month. And then the invitation is like, okay, now it's time to address it. But what I've really found is that, like, when one or two or three of these tanks starts to get empty, it puts a real drain on everything else. Like I know the burnout show, like people would know that when their relationship with themselves is at empty, it hurts every other tank, right? Like it's just not possible. It's like pouring into a leaky bucket. Like you can do as much as you like, but if that relationship with self is not in good stead, in good health, it makes everything hard. And same like in your marriage, if your romantic relationship is hurting, like it makes everything harder. And maybe that's the same. I don't have kids, but I imagine true, like for your relationship and network, like your relationships with your kids, if they're a tension point in your life and that tank is feeling really empty, there's no way that doesn't impact your career or your business or your wealth or your lifestyle or your contribution to the world.
That's gold.
Can we dig in a bit more around the relationship with yourself? Sets the tone for every other relationship, but then everything else in your life as well, like health, career, business, finances.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that was one of the greatest realizations that I had, coming away from Lombok and going like, hey, look, here's this thing that you haven't done for 5 years that lights your soul on fire. Like you just feel incredible when you do this thing. You haven't done it for 5 years. And I just recognize like there's so many opportunities for me to take care of my relationship with myself every single day. It's not like an occasional practice. I'm not talking about like going on a coffee date with myself once a month and like tick, that box is done. Like it's I don't know if this is the right word, but it's like cyclical. It's like I'm always somewhere in that cycle, in that relationship with myself. But I think there's like lifestyle decisions that I've made now that make it not only something that I like have to do, but something that I like really want to do and love doing. For me, like topping up my relationship with myself is like carving out time and making time for that active reflection or journaling, walking on the beach barefoot, surfing because there's no technology in arm's reach at all. Getting into nature, but then also like being intentional about my growth, like whether or not that's working with coaches or listening to podcasts like yours, or reading books. Like those are, for me, those are things that really add fuel to that tank. So I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yeah, you have. I think that was I was a couple of maybe a year or two ago, but our listeners know that I talk about this quite a lot, but Chris was the most annoying person on earth.
And you married him.
Well, he wasn't when I got married. I was like, oh, you're actually really cool. And it got to a point, and I think this encapsulates exactly what you're saying here, that like year by year, he just got more and more and more annoying.
I had time to practice.
But when I started actually looking introspectively at myself and not at him, it was all coming from me and
Yeah.
a broken relationship with myself. So then, therefore, I was triggered by a lot of things that he would say. And even this morning, actually, I was writing back an email to one of our clients, and it was kind of around parenting. She's like, yeah, like the biggest stress at the moment is my children or my child and the family dynamics. And I reflected then this morning too that when I started really loving myself and reprogramming those beliefs and supporting my nervous system, and also knowing that, you know what, not the perfect parent, don't ever want to be, because that's exhausting trying to be that person. But then when you have that love for yourself and the permission to be yourself, then, for example, parenting is a lot easier.
Yeah.
Because then the children, like I was personalizing my children as direct reflections of myself. So if they misbehaved, if they were not well, if they were ratty, then yeah, they were annoying. Like from a surface level, it was like, oh, you're so annoying. You're like, oh, you're so frustrating. Why can't you behave well? But the frustration was
Why can't you do exactly what I want and meet my expectations
and
100% of the time?
yes, yes.
Why can't you
yes.
do that, human that I
Come
love?
on. But and yeah, so it was all of that, but it was the deeper it was that the deeper reflection or the personalization was that, well, if they're not perfect, then therefore I am not perfect.
Yeah.
And so the frustration with them was really just a frustration with myself.
Yeah, do you know, as you've asked that question about like, how do I tell when my relationship with myself is off? And I was like, oh, I have a rhythm where I check in with myself. But I also know that if I'm struggling to get dressed, if I am having a hard time pulling clothes out of the wardrobe that I feel good in, that's a key indicator for me. Hold on, this should not be hard. You know what you like, you know what feels good on your body. If that's out of step, that's a pretty key indicator. Like that's an early detection sign that something about my relationship with myself is not right, because those are decisions that I make every day. It's impacting the way that I show up in the world. So that's probably an early detection sign. Another is like how I respond to minor inconveniences. Like, and I'm talking like minor inconveniences, like dropping my keys as I walk up the stairs with my dog, or, running out of poop bags while I'm out with my dog. Like I'm resourceful. I can solve that problem. But if that really gets under my gears, like that's probably an indication that my self-tank is running pretty low and I'm not in a very resourceful state. And same, like you could really like the way that you were responding to your most annoying husband ever. It probably had nothing to do with him, right?
Pretty much, no.
Yeah, and everything to do with you and the beautiful state you weren't living in.
But yeah, I resonate too with the minor inconveniences where it's just like, when it's like, hang on, last week that was not an issue. I didn't care that.
Yeah, I didn't care.
The house
I was able
messy.
to navigate that. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So sometimes we get caught up in expectations and perfection and things like that. I'm thinking about the dog poo thing. Resourcefulness, that really comes into it, because it could be very stressful. The other day I had to pick up after my dog, and I had no bag and I had to use leaves instead. And that could be really stressful if I had this expectation, it needs to be perfect, needs to be all this way. But, metaphorically.
I'm gonna get poo on my hands.
And I'm literally carrying shit in my hands.
Right, yeah. And metaphorically, like how much crap do we have to shift? And we have these perfect expectations of the way it should be done. And then we get stuck up, should creak, right? And we, it just leads to a stress that we put on ourselves, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've learned, is like that resentment comes from unmet expectations. And sometimes those expectations haven't been communicated, and they can be expectations that you're holding like for yourself. Like, oh, I'm really annoyed with myself because I didn't meet my own expectation that I set, like that infinity loop thing. But I think that's really reflective of like how resourceful I am is very much linked to how nourished and full my relationship with myself is. And I don't, not all of that is an inside job. Sometimes I need help. Sometimes I need a
Yeah,
coach.
totally.
Sometimes I need someone else to hold the mirror and ask the questions. Like, and I don't think any of us should go at this thing alone, like
I like it.
ever, really.
Well, I don't think we were ever taught how to do it.
Yeah.
And so coaches are invaluable because unless you had parents going like back in our generation when our parents were parents, there was, and I don't mean this meanly, but the emotional intelligence wasn't really there because they weren't taught it either.
Yeah.
And so, how the
Yeah.
heck can you learn to love yourself when we were just given, like, I'm thinking about my upbringing, loving parents. Like, I always knew that I
Mm.
was loved by them, always had everything that I needed, like, especially from a physical point of view. But there were things that were missing that my little child wanted or needed. Probably
Mhm.
didn't even realize that I wanted or needed or that it was missing until you become an adult running child patterns. And then it's like,
Mhm.
far out, I didn't know anything. And
Yeah.
then now, how do I navigate this?
100%. Hey, it's like, I mean, we're all in that. If you're listening to this podcast, you're clearly into personal development, right? There's something in your life that you want to be better, and you've gone about finding a free resource to help you do that.
Yeah.
So snaps for you listening. But yeah, I think that's all of it, isn't it? It's like, what have I learned? What belief have I got that is not serving me? Where did that come from? And what would be a better belief?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, for our listeners out there currently struggling with body burnout, what would you suggest? Because we talked about the 8 fuel
Hmm.
tanks. Maybe there will be something else that you suggest that's beyond that.
Yeah.
But what would you suggest are the first steps to moving towards healing, developing a deep relationship with yourself, creating a life by
Yeah.
design? I know there's quite a few questions there, but what would be the first step?
That's okay. So I'm sure lots of people have done some sort of yoga, and like at the end of a class, like you drop into savasana and like dead body pose, and you just lie there, right? And you can run a scan from toes to the tip of your head about, how does this body part feel? How does this, and identify like, actually, yeah, I might have a little bit of tension in like my left lat, but everything else actually feels amazing. And that's how I think about this 8 fuel tank sort of diagnostic is like,
Mm.
hey, when I take a moment to run a top to toes to the tip of my head of my life of these 8 different tanks, I might be really hung up on the one that's empty, but look at all this other stuff that I've actually got going on really well. So step one, run a diagnostic because things might not be as uh, shit in the hands as you maybe first thought. But I think one of the things I'm going to talk about the relationship with self as like the first thing, because I think that's probably the most common. And like I said, I think I believe that that's where everything starts. But one of the things that I did was after recognizing, hey, I love wakeboarding, haven't done that for 5 years. Why? I got out a journal and started to write the list of 100 like glimmers that bring me joy. And what are those things? And they don't all require me to hire a boat and a board and have 3-4 hours free. Like some of them are about like trying new coffee beans or seeing the sunrise or walking on freshly cut grass or, having a snuggle with my dog. Like those things like really bring me joy. But to get really conscious about that. And I think that's a great exercise or an activity for anyone who's struggling with their relationship with self to just go inwards. Like you have the answers. You really do. You know, there's moments in your life where you felt joy or happiness or elation or whatever the feelings are that you want to cultivate now. Like you've had them in the past. What was your recipe for success then? What were the things that you were doing frequently? We're on a like audio medium, but you can probably see there's a big bunch of flowers behind me. Like that is probably one of the cheapest cheat codes to make me happy for an entire week. Like I will look at those 10, 20 times a day and go, oh, gosh, that feels nice. I bought that for me. Like that was a
Mm,
gift from me to me.
That's good.
But that won't work for everyone. That's not going to be everybody's little glimmer. But I would encourage that you've probably got your own 100 and it will be unique to you.
yeah, I love that. That's so cool. Do you have anything else?
Glimmers. I like it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's sparkly, right? Like
Yeah.
like not life's not like it's not dull, is it? It's
No.
there's glimmers everywhere. Sometimes you just need to stop staring into the darkness to realize, hey, you're actually surrounded by glimmer. You're mostly glimmer.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's something that I learned from Sean Aker, who wrote The Happiness Advantage. That was probably, I don't know, I probably read that book like maybe 8 years ago. And Nathan and I really started an intentional gratitude practice around this idea that what you look for, what you train your brain, your reticular activating system to look for, you will see more of. And if you can get really conscious about like these glimmers that you see all day, like you start to notice more of them. And then that's the lens that you look at this world through. So if Philly, that sounds like what you were doing with Chris, is like readjusting the lenses that you were looking at him through.
Yeah.
He didn't change, you changed.
Yeah. And we talk about this a bit too, but any second there's 2 million bits of information, but we only take in about 5 to 9 chunks, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So when you were just talking about, if you start focusing on the glimmers, it's not that they magically appear, they're already there. It's just that your neural pathways are currently looking for certain things, and then doing that intentional shift. There's so much goodness.
Yeah, and you can start to piggyback them too. Like, so one of mine that I started actually during COVID was like, because I was going to the fridge however many times a day while at home, was like to open the fridge and be like, oh, I'm so grateful. Look at all this beautiful, nourishing food that I have access to. Like, and now that's a regular thought that I have is like,
Awesome.
I'm so grateful for all of this incredible, nourishing fruit, veg, tasty things that I love to eat. And I've programmed that to myself.
Yeah, so cool.
Beautiful glimmer.
Beautiful glimmer. Okay, another glimmer is your podcast. So you mentioned before you have your Date Forever podcast, which I think we were on there back in 2021.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to come and hear Chris and Philly's love story, it's a pretty good one.
I'll pop it in the links below.
Whirlwind.
But I'll also put your podcast in the link below, and your website, your social, so that if anyone else wants to learn more about you, get some more goodness from Sammi, all the links will be below there. But can you just tell us a bit more about the podcast, how listeners can find it, and you, and anything else that would be valuable?
Yeah, absolutely. So Date Forever, we've had the show for about 3.5 years. So well over 150 episodes there, chatting with couples and experts about the tips and tricks they found to keep a relationship fueled up. So it's a really nice balance of like the theory, like this is what should work from a researcher or from a sleep expert or whatever. And then from a real life couple who are like, this is what works for us. And it's been really interesting to see the things that work for some couples absolutely doesn't work for others. Yeah, there's some pillars of good relationship health for sure, but the nuances are really interesting. So we love hosting the show, but it's all about cultivating a really good relationship with yourself and your chosen person that you're doing life with. So you can get it wherever you're listening to this podcast, wherever you like to get your podcasts. It's called Date Forever. And I co-host with my husband, Nathan.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's been awesome. It's actually been really refreshing. And I'm keen to find some more glimmers in my life right now.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and if anyone just wants to connect, or you want to talk about a concept or see my list of 100 things that bring me joy, just slide into my DMs. I love chatting with people. My home on the internet is sammijaeger.com, but you'll find me on Instagram. That's probably my platform of choice, as Sammi somewhere. Sammi with an I.
Love it. So good. Thanks, Sammi. It's been awesome. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch up with you next time.
Thank you so much for listening. We so appreciate you. If you'd like to give us extra smiles, drop us a review and spread the love by sharing this episode.
You can also rate your own state of burnout and the root cause contributors by taking our Ending Body Burnout Assessment on our website. And if you're interested in learning about our group or one-on-one Ending Body Burnout programs, shoot us a DM via Instagram or Facebook.
Have the best day ever.